Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the first meeting between Greenwich residents who are interested in DOT project 56-316, resurfacing bridge rehabilitation and safety improvements on the I-95 Stanford Greenwich corridor. And we have DOT here today. Thank you so much for coming down. We have Jim Michael, our Deputy Commissioner of DPW, and a few people representing various groups, including the Riverside Association and the Noise Abatement Committee for 95. This meeting will be about an hour long, and so we want to keep everything tight and on track and on the subject. But we also have the Conservation, the Tree Conservancy here. Didn't mean to miss them. But this is something that's been an issue for a long time. And what we're trying to do here is be both proactive and look at things that could possibly mitigate some things that have gone on in the past that have really driven residents crazy and have, I think, affected quality of life, and certainly in some cases, probably even revenues because of the devaluation of homes. So we thank DOT for working with us and our DPW for being here on the front lines and agreeing to have this dialogue, this discussion. And certainly I know I don't have to say this, but I'll say it anyway. We're going to be very courteous and polite to each other and just maintain that throughout the discussions, both now and in future meetings. So with that, I will turn it over to my former colleague in the General Assembly here representing Connecticut DOT, Carlo Leone.
Thank you, First Selectman Camillo. It's a pleasure to be back in Greenwich. And for those that may not be aware, as you mentioned, a former legislator. I served 18 years and 8 years in the House and 10 years in the Senate, with the last few years as chair of the Transportation Committee. Since the beginning of the year, I am now with the department, working with the commissioner and the deputy commissioner and our team and the bureau chiefs, and very much aware of how issues in the locality are impacted and how we want to make sure we communicate with the town. So our goal here today is to really have a good conversation with what is going on in the area. We want to provide significant investment and do it in a way that is feasible for the town as well as the community and the state, and work amicably towards the solution. So I know there's a lot to cover, but what we want to do is be able to share with you some information and then take any action items and continue the dialogue as necessary. So nothing here is going to be final, but we do want to have a conversation so we know where we can make improvements. And that's the genesis of the meeting here today, to gather input so that we can accomplish that mission. So with that, I will hand it off to our Deputy Commissioner, Mark Rolfe, and then he can introduce some of the other members. And I'm sure there's a few others here that can be mentioned as well. Yes, thank you.
Deputy Commissioner, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlo. Thank you, First Selectman Camillo, for hosting us today. We appreciate the hospitality. I brought some senior members of our team here today to talk to you. We have other members who are joining remotely. To my left is Kim Lissay. She's the Bureau Chief for Policy and Planning. To my right is Neil Patel. Neil Patel was the project manager for this project. He's since been promoted and is now principal engineer in the highway design section. And across the way is Sue Fiedler, who's a landscape designer in our highway design section. So, and then we have other folks back at the office who can chip in if they need to. Real quick, I just wanted to review the agenda for everyone here today. So we're going to talk a bit about what's been done for tree cutting here in the town of Greenwich recently. We're going to talk about our replanting and vegetation management plan, and Sue's going to lead that conversation. Item C under 1 in the agenda that Carlo presented, I'm going to propose that let's move that into item 2. It plays more appropriately there because item 2 is the discussion of the project that's upcoming. And when we talk about timeframes, it'll be helpful to have talked about the project schedule. So Neil Patel is going to present on the project schedule, and then Kim is going to talk about the impacts of noise and the potential mitigation strategies around that and the issues that surround that. And then Item 3 is a right-of-way issue near Greenwich High School. We can touch on that very briefly at the end. So that's our plan for today. Just real quick about a little bit of my history. I'm a career DOT employee. I worked for the department for 37 years. I actually spent about 2/3 of my career working in Southwestern Connecticut. My first major project as a young project engineer was working on the reconstruction of the Messina River Bridge. So I spent 4 years here from 1988 to 1992 working on the full reconstruction of the bridge, not the emergency work, but the reconstruction. So I heard a lot of the issues that Greenwich went through during the collapse of the bridge, and I was there for reconstruction. So have a little bit of history here, long time ago. I guess I'm dating myself, but yes, I've been around. So let's talk for a moment about tree cutting in the town of Greenwich. So been lots of complaints about trees that have been cut recently. And, DOT, we've heard a lot of those complaints. There have been several parties involved, and I think in each instance, DOT sort of touched it, but I would say that we didn't control any of them. The work that was done between 3 and 4 was an encroachment permit for a sewer line installation for the town of Greenwich. Some of the work in Riverside was done by both Eversource and Metro North Railroad. The encroachment permit was certainly issued by us. The work that was done by Eversource and Metro North, they have a notification process to us, and they're actually leaseholders. DOT owns the land, but the terms of their lease give them rights to protect their facilities for safety and storm-related issues. So although we may have had some notice that they were going to cut the trees, under their lease with the department, they can do that work. So we didn't direct it. We certainly didn't perform the work. It was work done by third parties. So I guess the takeaway in this is DOT wants to be a good neighbor here. We want to work with the town. I think we've done that in that with this upcoming major project along I-95, we're here well in advance of the work. We want to have the conversation. We want to understand where the pain points are. To the extent we can mitigate some of that, we're willing to do so. We're willing to play our part, but we need to move the project along. So that's why we're here today, to continue the conversation. Okay. I think at this point, I'd like to ask Sue to come up and talk to the group about what we do for mitigation for vegetation management around the state and for this project.
Okay, is this working?
Press the button.
Oh. Every time I speak? No, you can look. Oh, okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Susan Fiedler. I've been with the department for going on about 20 years. I'm going to wait till Neil pulls up. So this project, my team is starting to get really into the weeds, no pun intended, performing what we refer to as an inventory and analysis of exactly what's going on out there for existing vegetation, reviewing the impacts of the project. We are hearing you guys loud and clear about your desire to expand native reforestation species wherever possible, and work with you in a design sense about any opportunities to develop gateways and things like that. Next slide, please. So what's out there? Next slide. Windshield survey. I've walked many of the neighborhoods surrounding the corridor right now. I have a pretty good idea of where there's great plant communities and where some of the plant communities could actually use some revitalization. Next slide. You have a lot of what you may think are canopy species, and I support and appreciate the value of some of these species as canopy trees, but all of these trees are considered invasive species. So, and they're weak wooded, and they're not performing a whole bunch of ecosystem services. So I just have to share that with everybody as we move forward. Next slide. Wherever there are good resources along the corridor, which would be impacted by the project, we're going to find them and do everything we can to keep them out of harm's way or protect them. Next slide. But most of all, we've very cognizant of the people who live there around the infrastructure and the neighborhoods and so on and so forth. And we are here to listen. And we're really looking forward to getting some more detailed information from stakeholders about their specific concerns so we can incorporate that into the preliminary design and make everybody a lot happier when they see that at that stage. Next. So the project impacts. So the thing about this project, as opposed to some other projects you may have seen, there are really limited areas where we're doing a wholesale clearing of a slope. We have some drainage structures to incorporate into the existing vegetation, which I just shared with you for the most part. Next slide. Wherever we do have impacts, I have this picture up here and the corresponding work, the drainage work that has to be done. We're going to be here for you. We're going to make and leverage the impacts of the project any way we can to make it come out lemonade. Next slide. As you can see, I overlaid an impacted area and sharing with you the existing vegetation, which may or may not be impacted. And we have a standing but dead tree in this area. So that's the way we're going to drill into this. If there's a good tree and we can protect it, we will. Any impacts that we have, because of the engineering and the drainage and the maintenance needs on this project, we're going to look at as an opportunity to revegetate and improve biodiversity. I'm going to go into that area and walk around and see where the nice oak trees are and, see how we can protect them, but also see how we can enrich the vegetation wherever there is an impact. Next slide. Okay, so this is a little complicated, the next two sections I'm going to walk you through, but this is what we do. We focus on the cross section, and anyone who is in some of our previous meetings, we take it very seriously. We have a lot of things going on in our right-of-way, but we want to work with nature. We need to understand what Mother Nature would do in Connecticut if left alone to her own devices, and I'm going to show you how we sort of work with that. Fighting Mother Nature never works. So not only are we working with our maintenance people, but we're also working with drainage structures. I'm showing you a reforestation in Bridgewater on the left-hand side, and there's a swale behind that retaining wall, which can't have reforestation trees growing up against it. It would knock the wall over and clog the drainage system. So we are talking about using the right kind of vegetation in the right place to provide reforestation and other services. Go ahead. What we have learned from our reforestation efforts is that we stay out of the way of the orange trucks and we work with the way that the highway corridors are maintained, and we are successful. The image on the right, I just drove past that area. Those trees are 40 feet tall. They went in at 2 to 3 foot tall whips. So this is a project in West Hartford off of 84. This illustrates what it looks like. It doesn't look that impressive, but it is in fact an entire cross section of vegetation. And the beauty of it is it works with the drainage on the project. It works with the mowing that the Department of Transportation has to do with their regular programmed routine. This is a sample of the project that's ongoing down in Stratford. This is what our reforestation looks like on the plan. And directly after construction, it's going to look like the pictures I just showed you, but it's going to work. We're going to put native tree species back on the 95 corridor wherever we can. So those plant communities, some of the sketches that I just showed you, sometimes they're going to be evergreen trees. Evergreen trees in and of themselves, we have to be able to mow around them. So we have to really consider carefully where those are going to be located along the corridor. But we will look for those opportunities. Next. The native canopy species, again, what I'm showing on this slide, the lower picture, again, I just drove by it. That's the Fairfield salt shed. The trees go in at 2.5, 3 feet tall, and we use them in combination with 2.5-inch caliper trees. The picture on the top in the center, you can really see how that works. This is the Old Saybrook train station. The oak trees on the left went in as whips not too long ago. And look how they are almost as large at this time as the 2.5 to 3-inch caliper oak on the right-hand side of that image. So this is what we do. It works. And again, we're planting an entire cross section and plant community wherever we can so that our maintenance people go around it and leave it be. And we get those ecosystem services that everybody is looking for. The lower image in the center is working with maintenance. We have some sweet ferns and a London plane tree, and strategically locating that plant community on a mini slope that we knew maintenance didn't want to deal with. So that's what we do on our projects. And so that's what you'll be seeing from us as we move forward. And obviously, wherever we can, augmenting the plantings with pollinator species that are more difficult to establish and seed by seed. Excuse me, I didn't say that right. Using gallon containers for some species that are more difficult to establish than by seed. So again, our specifications, I'm going to finish up. We have specifications for protecting natural resources. To the right is an image in Cortlandt Park, one of my recent projects. We reconstructed that historic wall to the left and worked with the contractor to completely cover the roots of that tree with wood chips for months before we removed it, all of those wood chips, and reseeded. Next. We're implementing compost use, and the left-hand slide, I'm showing an image of sustainable seed mix where compost was applied on the right-hand side and not on the left-hand side of that upper left-hand picture. And it really makes a difference in the performance. You can see the swale in the image on the right-hand side, fully covered with compost and excellent turf establishment. It's excellent for erosion control and plant establishment. But again, working with maintenance wherever we can. The plant communities have got to be mowed around. Otherwise, they're going to be succumb to the encroachment of invasive vegetation, which we don't want as we work together on improving canopy in Greenwich. The image on the right-hand side is a very small pocket of reforestation in Stamford, just to illustrate the level that we go to. It's a small area. There's probably only 30 whips in there, but we still want to reforest wherever we can. And it's a natural part of our process. And this is also Cortlandt Park, and the elm trees that we put at the gateway, at the reconstructed wall. It is, in the end, about your communities. We're cognizant of that. We're very cognizant of designing for you and the economics of your community and the walkability of it as well. And that's what I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Appreciate the update. I just want to emphasize a point, and Sue said this a couple of times during her presentation. Sue works on the capital project side, engineering, construction, and so her job is to, integrate good landscaping practices into our projects. But there is a handoff, and the handoff is to she called it maintenance forces, the guy in the orange trucks, but they're the ones out there every day mowing, weed whacking, doing the work of keeping the highway safe and operational. So there needs to be a synergy there between what we install and our capital projects, and then the handoff and ultimately the maintenance of our projects to highway operations. Next, I'd like to move to a short discussion on the I-95 corridor project. Neil Patel will be providing an update on the status of this project, but just very quickly, let me tell you what this project is. So typically when we do resurfacing projects on our highway system, we use a vendor in place kind of contract, a maintenance contract. But some projects do not lend themselves to that. It's typically projects where we haven't been done a lot of rehabilitation work through the years, and such is the case here in Greenwich. So in addition to paving, we're doing a lot of bridge repair work. The drainage system has not been attended to in quite some time. Some of the medium barrier is the shorter style. So that scope extends beyond what we do on a typical resurfacing project. We call these projects resurfacing by contract. They actually have engineered drawings as opposed to resurfacing alone is really a point and shoot type of a contract. So this is an engineered project. It is a pretty large scope because it's 7.5 miles long. It goes from the New York border all the way to Stamford. And there's a lot of work there. So Neil's going to update us on the status of the work.
Thank you, Mark. Take off my mask here so I can hear. Again, yeah, I think Mark kind of started it off by explaining the scope of the project. Let me just start the slideshow here. Here we go. Real quick, just to remind everyone, a lot of these slides, this presentation, similar to what we showed at the virtual public information meeting back in January and through some of the other meetings that we've had since then with, I believe, Senator Kasser and some of the other constituents. So again, the project limits start at the New York state line and they continue for about 6.5 miles to exit 6 in Stamford. Again, purpose and need, as Mark had mentioned, just to reiterate, really is to extend that service life of I-95, maintain the facility in a state of good repair. The focus is the pavement and the underlying concrete, original concrete from the 50s when it was constructed. Also, we want to make sure we address the bridges. And again, we're talking about bridge preservation type work, minor bridge work in terms of addressing the deck, partial deck patch, the parapets. We don't have any bridge replacements. We don't have deck replacements proposed within this corridor at this moment. Safety improvements, again, big part of the purpose and need here. We want to make sure we address the existing roadside safety deficiencies. So we want to upgrade the guide rail. We want to upgrade that median barrier. In some places it is 32 inches. We want to bring that up to today's design standards. In addition, we are also addressing a spot improvement at exit 3 southbound, which will address the operational and the safety benefits and provide some minor congestion relief on the main line there at exit 3 southbound. And again, in terms of addressing the pavement, one of the things that we are looking at is the mix design. We did hear that from some of our constituents as we progress from the virtual public information meeting. And we continuously do this. Our pavement design group works with the UConn Cap Lab. And so they're always looking at and researching different types of pavements, and it has to work for every situation. And in this case here, we will be using what they call, I don't want to get too technical, but it's more of a gap graded mix, which it performs well. That's our first focus, is to focus on durability, performance, life cycle, and safety. And that the design is going to meet all those needs. And as a secondary benefit, there is some minor noise benefits to it. Those benefits will be maybe evident in the first year or 2 years, but as the pavement wears, it won't be as prevalent. This plan just shows a typical slide showing our proposed improvements within the corridor. As I've mentioned a few of these in this area, just to add, all the illumination will be upgraded, new overhead signing throughout the corridor. The drainage improvements are extensive. This is existing system from the 50s, and there's a lot of metal pipes out there, and so we want to make sure we address a lot of those deteriorated pipes out there. So just real quick on exit 3 southbound, we will be extending the deceleration lane approximately, I believe, 1,200 feet to provide sufficient storage for vehicles. We know that backs up, especially during the morning, backs up onto the main line, very dangerous situation. So this improvement coupled with the town's recent work that's ongoing at exit 3 on Arch Street with the traffic coordination will definitely improve the situation. So Susan talked about the approach that she takes, and I just wanted to kind of point out one of the areas that we'll be addressing here. So to do some of this drainage work, we've got to build access roads down to these outlets. And our maintenance folks, in talking to them, have had a hard time cleaning and maintaining many of these areas. And we're coming through with this project, and we have to upgrade some of these outlets. So we are going to be working to install some of these access roads. And we'll work with Susan as each and every condition and to determine what treatment we can do going forward in terms of landscaping. Some of these will be permanent access roads. And again, they're about 10 to 12 foot wide. We talked to our maintenance folks and asked them what they would need to get down there. So again, it's not tree cutting through the corridor. It's really just in select areas. Schedule. So right now we are in the final design phase. We just started that. We've got our designer on board and full steam ahead to meet this schedule. We anticipate preliminary landscape design plans in January and February. And Jim, as we have talked previously, we will, be coordinating those as those become available. We'll make sure that they're reviewed by the town. We do intend to proceed to a final design by June and advertise probably early fall. Start construction in the spring of 2023 with about a 3 to 4 year duration. As we go through this final design, we'll have more information in terms of the staging and how we stage the project, especially in relation to some of the adjacent projects that we have, whether it be Route 1 or along I-95. The current construction cost is $205 million. That's 90% federal and 10% state. Okay. Can turn it over to Kim, if there's anything else you want to add.
So we've certainly heard the complaints from ever since the public information meeting where Neil came down here. Lots of complaints or concern about noise issues. There's been some correspondence on the matter. Kim Lassay leads our Bureau of Policy and Planning and our noise group. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Just giving Neil a chance to pull up presentation. Kim Lassay, Bureau Chief of Policy and Planning. One of the groups that I am proud to lead is our noise group. And I'm going to try to just give a little bit of a background, kind of a noise 101 here to try to lay some framework for some further discussions. So thank you, Neil. Every project that we have goes through a screening to determine if a noise analysis and a noise study is required. And so some noise barrier basics, just to go over, what noise barriers do and don't do. Noise barriers certainly can block sound, but there are criteria that we need to meet that are set by FHWA as to when noise barriers would be considered and also when they would be installed. There's a lot of things that play into noise. You need to think of noise as a wave, much like light waves are. So they travel, they do different things in different topographic conditions. They do different things when they hit buildings. So a little bit of science there. I'm not the science guy. I'm not the science guy, but just to get the framework of how noise works. Just a little bit of background there. So again, we follow the Code of Federal Regulations when it comes to determining when noise barriers are installed. And the project that Neil is leading up is a project that does not qualify as a type 1 project. So type 1 projects, if you could go to the next slide, Neil, are things like a new highway on new location, addition or relocation of an interchange, looking at additional through lanes, adding a way station or a rest stop or a rideshare lot or a toll plaza. So this project, as it sits right now, does not qualify as a type 1 project. Therefore, a noise study was not concluded. So I was listening in the night of the public information. I realized that there were a lot of questions around that. And these are the guidelines that we are held to go by. To give a little bit of background of what would happen if it was a type 1 project, I can run through these slides fairly quickly. So a noise analysis process would be we would look at land use. We would look at if we have sensitive receptors in the area, and then look at those based on FHWA's noise abatement criteria. We would then actually take existing noise readings in those areas, and then there's actually a very complicated model that gets run that looks at the traffic as it exists, looks at traffic as it is forecasted to be based on the project, and looks at whether a noise barrier would be warranted. There's also a cost benefit analysis that is done. So we look at both feasibility and reasonableness. So there's engineering factors that come in. I had mentioned topography. We look at drainage, we look at utilities, we also look at safety issues. And then the reasonableness comes in when we look at the number of benefited receptors. So a benefited receptor could be the number of residences that would benefit from a noise wall, as well as businesses that might have like an outside recreational area. And then we look at that and we look at the cost-effective index. And in order for a noise barrier to be installed, it would also have to meet that cost-effective index. And right now, based on our noise policy, that's at greater than $55,000 barrier per benefited receptor. So there is another type of program, and we have been in receipt of some correspondence questioning this type of program. A type 2 program is a program that does not rely on a type 1 project coming through the area, in essence. A type 2 project would be a standalone program that would look at retrofitting noise barriers on an existing highway. There was a type 2 program many years ago, but it has been unfunded for decades. And this is certainly something that we can discuss. We are in the very infant stages of looking at a type 2 program. The first thing that we have to do is to do a statewide study. And so we are in the process of getting that set up. It is a step in a many-step process. Our type 2 noise program, if one were to be initiated, still does need approval from FHWA. What it would basically do would be to give us a heat map of sorts as to where issues may be across the state. It's a very rough model. It doesn't take into account topography. It doesn't take into account a lot of the factors, but gives you that rough look. And then it would help us to prioritize and look at what areas would warrant a type 2 program. An important thing to note would be that type 2 program, would then have to look deeper into each of those areas that was identified. So it would be something that's quite a ways out as far as setting expectations, but something that does exist and has been brought to our attention as to, other states are doing this, why aren't you doing this? So I just wanted to give a quick overview and be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. We have Greg Piccinino of the 95 Noise Abatement Group with his hand up.
Okay, thank you very much. A couple questions. I'll start with the last presentation. When you did the way station, which was a type 1 project, and you projected forward traffic volumes 10 years as required by legislation, have you checked those numbers to current traffic? And because my understanding is if those projections, if you exceed, then there should be some kind of remediation because the traffic studies exceeded the studies you did at that time, and that would warrant some kind of noise remediation or other noise studies. Have you looked at that? Because waste station is type 1.
Yeah, so I don't have that information available. Typically, when we build a project, there's an assumed traffic growth, and that's the question you're asking. We'll have to look into it and get back to you.
Okay, because if it exceeded by a certain percentage, then you would, by law, be obligated to do a noise study, correct?
I'll take you at your word.
Okay, I don't know. I'm not a
familiar.
lawyer.
I don't read those
Okay.
regulations regularly, but yeah, we'll definitely look into it. We'll get you an answer.
The other question I have is regarding the categorical exemption and I had requested information because it was checked that there would be no impact on low-income minority communities. And we know that the Byram community is a low-income minority as well as the school system. I never received any information regarding how that categorical exemption was checked that there would be no impact.
Yes, so I think we did exchange a few
Yep.
emails back and forth. I think there might have been some problems given the size of the file. And you're saying you have, did you?
I have the file and it's checked, and there was a person named Denise who was responsible for that, and there was an extension given, but there was no, without knowing the number that the extension pertained to, it's impossible to contact that person, nor having the last name or an email. It said, talk to Denise, who was responsible for that categorical exemption, but it was almost impossible to find out who Denise was.
Right. So yeah, this project did qualify, yes, for a categorical exclusion, automatic categorical exclusion. In terms of, again, we look at the proposed scope of improvements, and given, again, the scope of the improvements that are primarily within curb to curb, we call it, on I-95. The only widening that we are performing is at the exit 3 southbound location. Other than that, the rest 6.5 miles is within curb to curb. So the proposed, that's how we look at it, is the scope of improvement. So in terms of those improvements, there's no direct impact to any of the adjacent communities.
Great.
Kim, am I pretty much on page with that in terms of how we address the scope and when we're going through the NEPA document?
Yeah, certainly. You're correct, Neil. So, NEPA is based on the action itself. So that's the first thing that we look at in our screening. Obviously, it goes through a myriad of professionals in our office that screen it. And sounds like if there was any lack in communication, we can follow up and make sure that you got that file and that information.
And how many access roads are you planning to build?
At this point, it's still undetermined, but the exact number, but given the number of outlets and it's 6.5 miles, there'll be quite a few of the access roads that will be built. And some of them are going to be temporary.
Okay, and then the life cycle of the asphalt that you're planning to use is what?
Primarily, we look at least I believe a 20-year.
So you don't need to
20-year life.
resurface or repave for 20 years?
No,
If I-
well, again, based on our loadings and then given the conditions, underlying concrete, that we will probably be out here.
Yeah, it's largely dependent on the mix design of what's selected here. So I don't think we've made a final selection. So we're still looking at that, but 20 years will be an outer limit. And
Before you do any kind of resurfacing?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's no resurfacing for 20 years.
That's an upper limit. I would say, 10 years to 20 years is probably the range that we're talking about, depending on the mix design. So as few as 10, as many as 20.
Okay, and 2 more questions. Just one for Kim. You talk about a, noise study. Connecticut DOT did conduct noise studies historically and does have a list of areas that exceeded federal and state limits from 1995. If you have that list, I'm sure there's more areas given traffic increases, but you already know where the issues were 26 years ago. We know that those areas have not been remediated unless there was a type 1 project. So why would you have to undertake a multi-year noise study to find additional areas when you know that there's 120 already?
Your point's well taken. I understand where you're coming from. that list, I'm familiar with it. Again, I think your answer is in the question. It's from 1995. We've had, very major changes to our highway system and our network since that time. So that is very much outdated. We need to take a look at that. And of course, traffic has changed and continues to change with COVID, and is probably going to change as we're on a rebound and we're seeing the same traffic volumes we did before COVID.
Yep.
And just to clarify, the initial study itself, we are not talking about many years. The process itself may be many years before neighborhoods may actually see any retrofitted noise barriers come in, if indeed we can get funding for such a program. But the initial noise study, we are anticipating that should only be about a year.
And one last question, with regards to, for example, the cutting by Metro North, which you've permitted, not having access to the contract, but there is a concept of line of sight and creating a visual pollution when you clear cut. Or when you cut trees, and usually there's a lot of states have rules that say you just can't cut it down and create a line of sight to something like a highway or rail line. With the permitting of Metro North, why didn't the DOT stipulate some kind of visual barrier? And because it also pertains to what the concept of partial eminent domain. So you may not be possessing the real property, but you've negatively impacted real property.
I'm not an expert on the terms of the lease or the operating agreement with Metro North. The trees, what I was told, the trees were removed for safety reasons, for trees and wires, or the last 2 storms ago, Metro North service went down for a pretty significant period of time. So Metro North takes those issues seriously. As I said, that the terms of their agreement say that they can do what they need to do to protect the safety and integrity of their system. So the line of sight issue, I can't really speak to that. I just don't know. We can get you an answer on how the decision making was made on the extent of tree removal.
Thank you.
And just to clarify, number of access roads, the beauty of technology here, we've got our other folks connected, about 10 access roads.
Thank you.
Those are not paved, no. So you'll have like a stone base.
Thank you. And those, not all of those are going to be permanent, you said?
No, not all of those. As we go through specific ones, we will make sure, which ones need to be. I think it's all about working with our maintenance folks so that they can get access. We want to make sure that we don't leave any deteriorated conditions out there so they can get out and inspect.
Thank you. Again, thanks, Greg. To get the meeting started quickly, before I should have went around and introduced everybody, and we have our state representative from the 150th, Steve Meskers, who also had his hand up patiently.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Fred. So as we sit and listen to the project, and this is, the second presentation, I want to thank you all for coming. I really appreciate that. Particularly my ex-colleague who abandoned us for bigger and greener pastures. I'm concerned with the project for the following. If we step back, we're looking at a project of basic maintenance that's 40 or 50 years in the making. And I appreciate that the resources were limited over the last 40 or 50 years, or some of it was just time related that needs to be done. So my suspicion or concern would be that we may not see you again for another 30 or 40 years for this type of infrastructure as we do this. So I think getting it right is supremely of importance to all of us here in Greenwich. The 10 access roads, I think I would take note of that when we're talking about the noise study. Granted, they're not going to be paved and people aren't going to be racing up and down them at 60 miles an hour, but you're going to be taking down vegetation and trees for 10 access roads. If you leave us with 5, that's 5 more than were there before. When you look at the gravel and all of the culverts and the drainage issues you have to resolve, there's going to be a lot of trees taken down during the course of that as well. You just have to access all of what you need to do. It's as I was speaking to Carlo earlier, I said, it's like a de novo project. So in many ways, the impetus of both landscape design and sound mitigation, quiet pavement technology, a number of the issues we brought, come to the forefront because we won't have these negotiating processes and this conversation 5 years from now. We'll be left with a project. On the sound barriers, I'm a little concerned that I don't see in the criteria you're presenting us with how they can possibly be incorporated within the design, much less the funding of the existing project. So I'd like to see us consider what we can do with both the vegetation and the sound barriers and quiet pavement technology, what is potentially available now, what we can think about incorporating, which may or may not be able to be funded. So they may be left to the side, but if they're not part of the design process, we're basically going to be left wondering how we get sound barriers in 2028, because that's when you're finished. Because if I come in and say, we want sound barriers, you're going to tell me to get the hell off your property until you finish the project that you've undertaken. And the integrity of the project is going to take precedence over sound mitigation and vegetation. So the lack of incorporation in design is a deep concern to me, because it'll delay any implementation to resolve the issues. And I think the important thing is that we have federal resources, we have state resources, and we potentially have resources that the residents of the community would be willing to bring to bear. And so we have to look at this as that type of a project. I'm concerned that when you talk about the sound study for the entire 95 corridor, that we could be going out to 3 years to get that. And if we're talking about decibel levels, you would think that we would try to incorporate that with the anticipation of this project. We have the existing studies that were done in 95. Where maybe a quick review of the decibel levels on the 6.5 miles might provide you the framework for the next project you're going to do after this, because this is the largest project you have, apart from bridges and mix masters, in the entire state at this point. So I think I would like to see this become the benchmark criteria for how you roll it out. So it's not give me I'm from Greenwich, or do it for me from I'm in Greenwich, but let's set the criteria and the bar high enough that everybody walks away saying this is the perfect project, particularly for the gateway. And I'm concerned. I think we're moving in that direction. I know you can hear the pressure and our frustration. So now I just want to see you move it. I think, it's not that I think we're asking for the process that needs to be taken across the state over time. And we don't have the funds. We're not doing the rest of the state. We're doing this. You picked on us first. So we're going to ask you to put those resources to work for it. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. All said. Okay, Joanne Messina of our Tree Conservancy. You can go to that podium.
Hi, yes, Joanne Messina, Executive Director of the Greenwich Tree Conservancy, and we've been in contact. Let me say first that I'm really, really pleased to see you here. Thank you, and it's great to put a face to a name. So that's really helpful for us. In addition, under the description that the first selectman gave us, I thought this was going to be a little more of a conversation versus a presentation, because I was at your January presentation. I've heard of your other presentations from Jim Michael as well as the first selectman. So I'm going to sort of go with that idea and have a little more of a conversation, if we may. Starting with what Mark started with, DOT, and I want to reiterate, a lease does connote some type of supervision. And some of the issues which you'll continue to hear is vegetation comes down. We don't know how many trees are taken out. We don't know how many trees should be, shouldn't be there. I think inventories are really important when we're talking vegetation. We spoke of canopy trees, native versus non-native, helpful versus non-helpful. Well, canopy is really helpful. And I think you all know that the governor has been working really hard to do a climate change initiative. And canopy is really, really key. And we also talked about underserved communities. Canopy is really key. So when you speak of the fact that you may be taking something down, but putting something quote unquote better because it's native, if you're taking the canopy down, we're in trouble here. If you're taking the canopy down around the underserved areas, we're in trouble here. And that's where we were, exits 3 and 4. When you go to Riverside, you're talking an area that had school children, that has school children right abutting the area. So you're talking taking tree canopy down, again, abutting an elementary school. While I'm speaking of that, you're taking down tree canopy, and invasives have now come in because we have a horrible invasive issue here with porcelainberry and many other invasives. But with the trees there, again, the tree canopy not there, we have in the last 3 to 6 months had an amazing, amazing growth of invasives, which is, I'm not going to go into the myriad of issues with that, but I know many of you know them. You speak of whips, planting whips. We plant only 2 to 3 inch caliber trees here, the Greenwich Tree Conservancy. Let me just briefly say we have worked here for 15 years. We're a nonprofit. We work in partnership with the town, and we've planted in excess of 5,500 trees on public lands in Greenwich. We are very willing to be partners with Connecticut DOT. Matter of fact, I've been back and forth with Jim Barnes most recently about some issues on Route 1 because we really want to be partners. Just today, I received a $2,500 donation from a resident who said, can you use this to plant trees on Sound Beach Avenue by I-95? And I said, I'll do my best. I'll try. But I'm getting a lot of those. I'm getting a lot of specific people saying, I will pay. Can you help us? I have to say personally, anecdotally, I was awakened last night this morning at about 2 a.m. with traffic from I-95. I live by Greenwich Hospital. You may not know the town, but it's over a mile from I-95. And I was up for several hours listening to trucks going on I-95. And I thought, wow, that is really startling, because I have this meeting today and I have not heard that before. That isn't something I've heard from my house before. But again, as we continue to clear cut trees, this is what occurs. Access road, excuse me, Representative Meskers, I think, hit the access road issue, and I just wholeheartedly agree. Why are we, taking down something that helps us 365 days a year for, a couple of months access? I've always had an issue with, the footprint versus the access to. Whenever anyone does any type of development here, whether it's commercial, housing, they clear cut the whole property because they have to get to the footprint. Well, I think we have to get better at that. And I think we have to have trucks going around things and through things if there are trees, and the tree canopy is helping us. I want to say that we really would love to partner with you. We would love to help you if there's a financial issue, if we can. We really want to assist in any way we can. I mean, that's what the Tree Conservancy began as 15 years ago, because there was no group like that. We don't have a tree commission in Greenwich. We don't have any governmental tree group, so we are it. But we also do raise our private funds, which is why we have the public-private partnership with the town, and we would love to have it with the state as well. The other area you show, just finishing up, Sound Beach Road, I spoke of Historical Society. You had the photo of the Cascade area. We planted in the marina because there was no place else to plant. We're trying. I happened to have a meeting at noon today outside at this Historical Society. We couldn't hear each other. We were sitting like this. There were this many of us, and you just couldn't hear anything. Now, granted, you were right on 95 at that point, but there should be some assistance with that. So bottom line, we would really love the conversation to continue. We really, we appreciate the presentations, but we've heard the presentations. And we understand your constrictions possibly, but I think we can really assist and we can help, and we're sort of trying to go at the same. Again, reiterating, but we're really working right now against the clock with our storms, with the climate change, with a lot of what's occurring. And anything you read tells you trees are really, really helpful with all of those issues. So I think, we don't want to be the ones taking them down specifically until we know we can replace, and we continue to do that. So thank you. And again, any questions I can answer, any help we can be, very interested.
Thank you, Joanne. Yeah, just to piggyback on what Joanne and Steve said, when we do the access roads, whether they're 5 or 10, if we could see, not only where they are, but what exactly is supposed to come down and what the plan would be to replace them when the project is done, that would be helpful in mitigating people's concerns and fears about, having to wait 20 years for some type of coverage. So yeah, and that goes for, I think, anything that we're planning here, just to give us that heads up. And you're coming here today is a good first step, and we're certainly grateful for you taking time to come down here, fighting traffic. But this is a conversation, and again, today was meant to be more of a presentation, but yeah, that's okay. But at least we know exactly where DOT is now on it, and we have a little bit of a framework. And what do we want to do as far as circling back and putting in the books maybe an idea, in a next meeting time frame, just to give people an idea, so we don't leave it open ended.
Yeah, we're happy to come back here and meet again. I think it might be appropriate when we're have developed the final design a little bit further along. Neil, maybe.
Yeah, I think the fact that we just started the final design, so we can get into let our design consultant progress that design a little bit more, would definitely help. And then working with Susan in terms of the opportunities throughout the corridor together. And as soon as we have that plan, I think is a good time to come back and coordinate with the town.
Thanks. And roughly,
I think we had
Won't hold you.
January, February for the preliminary landscape plans, but I think, Susan, you had mentioned that, before that, I think if you want to go through and do a walkthrough, you mentioned.
Yeah, so the
You wanna-
preliminary design is.
Don't use the microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry. So the preliminary in my mind is step 2. But meeting with the people who, like Joanne and Ms. Foster, people who are really interested in taking a walk and looking around, that I was thinking October, November, that we can get closer to being on the same page. We're going to learn from each other. Oh, you're going to come with us? You're walking? All right. Well, turn it off. Yeah, that sounds fine. People who are really interested in the weeds and that type of stuff. But again, I want to clarify about the clearing of, I didn't suggest that we wholesale remove areas of Norway maple that are not impacted by the project. That wasn't my intention. I'm just trying to spell out what I'm seeing out there. And I think taking a walk is going to shed a little more light on some of the specific issues and opportunities. I'm an opportunist.
thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you. I know we're at the 1 hour mark, but Liz had her hand up, and then Greg had a follow up. Go ahead, Liz.
Liz Peldunas from Riverside Association. I just had one comment and one question. I'll start with a question that I'd like to understand for sure. Are we at the 0% marker right now and just embarking on our final design phase? Yes?
So the design in its entirety is at, I would say, like a 30-40% design. That's how
Okay.
we classify it once we start final design.
Okay, and the next time we meet, you would expect that we would be at X%, or you would be at X% design?
Yes, it would be probably what we typically call a semifinal, which is 70%.
70? Okay. And then the other thing I'm just struck by as I listened today is I did read the DOT's mission statement, and I hope that you all keep in mind that it's not just about the throughput of what happens on I-95, that it impacts people around it, animals around it, everything around it. And I think that there are some ways that we can do some cost benefit and trade-offs to still have the throughput that you need as the DOT, but not at the detriment of the residents of Connecticut. So thank you.
Hi, just a quick follow-up, and we do appreciate you coming here. The group I represent, Stop Noise 95, is looking for some kind of statewide, as Steve Meskers mentioned, using this project as something to get the state aligned with what most other states in the country are doing, including places like Texas. My question would be, and it goes to Steve Meskers' point about incorporating in the design, future, the ability to do noise remediation in the future. When you come back here in January, you'll be 70% done. Usually, and I'm not a civil engineer, but if you have a house that's 70% done, it gets really difficult to change the bathroom and the plumbing. So my question is the COT going to take into consideration the comments by Representative Meskers with regards to potentially doing an RFP that includes the possibility of easily doing something in the future? Or are we just going as status quo, the way it was presented in January, the way it was presented today?
So I think we can commit to you that you're going to, I think you've heard here today, you're going to get the very best thinking that we have. I brought, our senior staff here. These are all dedicated professionals. I think we can also commit to you that we can design a project so as not to preclude noise barriers in the future. Whether they're included in this project, I think that's a separate issue.
Okay. Thank you.
Just wanted to add in terms of some of the suggestions that we've had from the previous meetings, as I mentioned, in terms of the pavement design, our folks are looking at it, working with UConn Cap Lab in terms of what's the best appropriate mix type here for, again, performance, safety, and as a secondary benefit, that proposed mix type does provide some minor noise reduction. I think the fact that we have a new pavement surface, we know there's transverse joints out there that are probably causing some of those specific noise. We have a new pavement surface, new joints that would help. We do have our design consultant looking into some of the different types of quiet bridge joints. So they're going to look into to see if it's applicable. And this is more really for statewide. We want to see if there are items out there that are applicable statewide.
And the asphalt that was used, the noise reducing asphalt that was used in Hartford, that I assume is near some commissioner's home or a politician's home, has that been successful?
So I think, in terms of the past comments, I think we're talking about 91 somewhere in Hartford in terms of I believe it's the ultra thin treatment that was used. And that specifically was used, I think, for a resurfacing type project. And according to our pavement design experts, we have a composite pavement concrete underneath and we're stripping it down to that concrete, repairing it. So in this case, you've got a larger, thicker overlay that's going in, so it's not applicable here. Again, our pavement design experts, they're working with UConn, daily in terms of looking at the latest research. They're not just following the traditional, they're looking for ways to obviously implement better products as long as, again, it doesn't compromise our performance and our safety.
Okay, because in the official response that you give, you cite a technology from 1950 and another one from 1990 as the two noise reduction pavements that Connecticut looks at which is, there's at least 40 or 50 new designs in Europe now. So I would suggest that if that's happening, your communications department, sort of share that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Steve?
Yeah, I don't want to repeat and beat a dead horse on that. I think to the extent that we can incorporate the potential for design for sound barriers or where they would be permitted so that we don't have to wait 5 years, even if we don't have the resources, it would be very helpful. Just because I'd rather not be blocked on the issue. If we can't agree on state or federal funding and we have to undertake something here, I want to know that we have a solution to that. And I appreciate on the joints because I was dumbfounded. I got a call from a constituent who said, it's my annual call to tighten the joints. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, they live underneath 95 and it's going into New York. And apparently they come out of alignment and they slam the hell out and the noise is unbearable. And I just hope that when you're talking about the new joints, I'm hoping we can resolve those issues going forward with a little more of a permanent solution, given the weight of the tractor trailers that are going through our state, to make sure that we can alleviate that transmission of noise. So thanks.
Okay, well, thank you very, very much for everybody for attending, your questions, your concerns, and your continued commitment for dialogue on this. And thank you, DOT personnel, for coming down here and answering the questions, and for agreeing to a dialogue and to working with the town and hearing our concerns.
We look forward to coming back in a couple months.
Okay, thank you so much. Drive safely home.
Thanks.